So Luke is a former professional footballer who now takes on some of the world's most extreme ultra endurance challenges. And he's translated his unique experiences, as well as overcoming his dark personal battle with depression, into an informative, engaging, and highly entertaining presentation. So, without further ado, I will hand you over to Luke.
What if the only real obstacle that we have in life is ourselves? What if we are the ones that are holding us back, that is really sort of stopping us from moving forward? This is a question that I've posed, that I've asked, that I've answered myself many times, and it's one that I'm putting to you today. What if you are the one that are holding you back, holding your business back, and holding potentially your employees back from reaching their true potential? As Kath mentioned, I grew up and all I ever wanted to do was play professional football. I grew up in Australia and it wasn't the biggest sport over there, but that's all I ever wanted to do. And as a kid, there was nothing else that I had my sights set on. So I persevered with the setbacks of it not being a very big sport, and also not having anyone in my family actually play the sport. So this was my big dream. This was my goal. This was me viewing life without any limits from a very young age. Now, I wasn't the best when I was a kid. I wasn't this some sort of child phenom. I actually never got picked for my local team up until I was 15. I tried out every year from 10 until 15, but I never got picked. And back in the 90s, it was brutal. So imagine this. You've got 10, 11, 12-year-old kids sitting down on the grass on a football pitch. You've got a couple of the coaches there, and they say to you, if I read your name out, come and sit behind me because you've made the team. Parents are behind the kids. There's 30-odd kids and they're picking about 16. And you're sitting there waiting for your name to be called. And for about 5 years, I was left waiting for my name to be called. And it never was. And there was one thing that my parents installed in me that I still use today, and it was curiosity. So after I never got picked for these teams, I went up to the coach and I said, Mr. Seckold, still remember his name, why wasn't I picked today? And he would tell me the reasons why. And this made me think, if I can become better at these things, maybe I'll get picked next year. And that's what I did. 5 years later, after first trying out for the team, I finally made it. And it wasn't because anything happened dramatically over that last year of that 5-year period. It was simply because I continued to work hard, have a positive mindset, and figure out what I needed to accomplish in order to get to my goal. So fast forward many years, I ended up playing professional football in several countries around the world. Firstly, in Australia, then I went on to play in America, Belgium, and I had a few short stints over here in the UK. But I'll save you the trouble. Don't Google me using the term football after my name because you won't find anything. I played in the real lower leagues of professional football, and trust me, you don't want to see what that was like. So I fulfilled my childhood dream, being paid to kick a ball around. And then at the ripe old age of 28, after battling with several injuries for years up to this point, I decided to retire. At one stage of this period of my life, I had 3 surgeries in the space of 11 months. 3 surgeries to different parts of my body, all unrelated, in 11 months. But that's not what stopped me. It was a year later when I strained and tore my calf muscle while training that stopped me from fulfilling the rest of my childhood dream. So picture this, hobbling home, laying down in my bedroom, icing my calf, because that's what you do when you tear a muscle, being completely lost, because the only thing I ever wanted to do as a child was to kick a football around. What do I do now? I didn't make millions of pounds from playing football. I made really no money. So what was I going to do with the rest of my life? Well, I did the one thing that I thought made sense in this period of time. That was to get my laptop and start playing around on Google. That's what you do, right? And an idea popped into my head. A friend of mine who was an Ironman triathlete in Australia told me about this race. He told me about this running race that was so extreme. People got lost. People even died. And not everyone finished. And I thought it was the most ludicrous idea I'd ever heard. So I Googled this race in this period of my life where I was a little bit lost, where I didn't really know where I wanted to go. And I found the race. I found this multi-day ultra marathon that covered 6 marathons in 7 days through the middle of the Sahara Desert. And it was called the Marathon des Sables. Now, some of you may have heard of this. Hands up if you've heard of it. Yeah, there's a few hands. Put your hand up if you've done it. Come on, there's got to be one. There we go. Love it. There's always one. So here we are. Over a whole week, when I did it back in 2012, you ran 155 miles in a week. You carried everything that you needed in your backpack for the entire week, except for water, which I still can't quite wrap my head around this. You're running through the middle of the desert and your water is rationed to you on a daily basis. You can't just say, please, can I have some more? Because if you do, you get a time penalty. As I said, it doesn't make any sense. We're running through the desert and we are limited in how much water we're allowed to drink unless we get a penalty. Anyway, we're also put up in lavish accommodation, which is basically a sheet that we slept under with 7 strangers that we didn't know for the entire week. And we carried everything else in our backpack. So think about this. What you have for breakfast on a Monday morning and what you have for dinner on the Sunday evening, and everything you eat for that entire week, you have to fit into your backpack and then run the equivalent of 6 marathons in 7 days. Let's just say I didn't eat a lot that week. So this was it. This was my new target. This is what I was going to do. I had 6 months to prepare for what Discovery Channel deemed the world's toughest race. Now, here's the kicker. Yes, I was a professional footballer, but I had never ran 10 kilometers before I started to train for this. I had never ran a half marathon. I had never run a marathon. And in 6 months' time, I was going to run the equivalent of 6 marathons in 7 days through the middle of Sahara Desert. For all of you non-runners, I'm pretty sure this doesn't make any sense. And if you're trying to make sense of it, don't, because it doesn't. And I can see Michael nodding and shaking his head, who's done the Marathon des Sables, thinking, yeah, this guy is an absolute nutcase. And you would be right. So I went out there to start my new career. The boy in me said, you know what, Luke, you can do anything. Nothing can hold you back. So I decided, after reading a few books and watching a few documentaries, that I was going to start my new career as an endurance adventurer. What did that mean? My plan, my business plan, my goal that I was going to do for the rest of my life sounded something like this. I'm going to go and do these crazy big extreme challenges all over the world. And I'm going to write books about them, have documentaries made about them, speak on stages and through a computer screen to people, companies, teams all over the world, and share my insightful and my inspiring and motivational stories with everyone. This was my plan. This is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Everyone, my mum, my family, my friends, thought I was mad. So during the Marathon des Sables, things didn't go to plan. I had a stomach bug on day 2, which meant I was really dehydrated because I was vomiting and had diarrhea. I had infected toes and I was on penicillin on day 3. I degloved one of my toes, which basically means all the skin down to the red, raw flesh just fell off and they were all infected. Day 4, which you run a double marathon that day, I was so severely dehydrated, I had a choice to make. I was told I either pull out or I have an intravenous drip in the middle of the Sahara Desert, an intravenous drip while laying on my back on the sand in the desert of Morocco. I chose for that. Had an intravenous drip on my way. Eventually, I finished. I finished the Marathon des Sables. And I accomplished my first goal, to complete an ultra marathon and start my journey into the world of being an endurance adventurer. Now, I was thinking, how can I sustain this lifestyle? How can I move myself forward and actually make some money from this? So I set out to do all these crazy challenges. And whatever money that I was making from working with other athletes, speaking at the time, I would put straight back into my adventures. I was invited out to Hong Kong to do a race and I thought, I've got to do some sort of adventure. And I went off and I saw that there was a tropical island just off the south coast of China called Hainan. And I thought, cool, that looks awesome. I'm going to go out there and have an adventure. Now there's a mountain range, a small mountain range through the middle of the island. And I thought, I'm going to run from the airport in the south of the island up to the mountain range, climb the highest peak and run back down to the airport in a couple of days. Sounds like a great adventure. Awesome. Let's do it. Sleep in a hammock, eat some of the local food, all that good stuff. Long story short, there was a massive tropical storm that went through the island a couple of days before I got there. There was no power, trees were down, and I ended up being stuck in the middle of the island with 100 kilometers to get back to the airport. And I had 2 days to get there. Here's the kicker. None of my credit cards worked. My bank cards didn't work. This was before we all had smartphones. My phone was in Hong Kong. I actually didn't even have a mobile phone with me. I had no cash and I had no water and I had 100 kilometers to cover. Brutal at the time. Obviously I made it, but great story to sell to some magazines to make some money from this project. And another great story to tell on stage. Box ticked, moving on. I then went out to Nepal and spent 2 months out there. The first 6 weeks, I was living high up in the rural mountains where no Westerners had really been before, living with some elite ultra marathon runners. I was running up and down mountains all day long, learning from these people who had no running water, no electricity. Every day was about survival, taking care of their animals, cooking, cleaning, eating, and repeating. That was it. And they were some of the most happiest people in the world. After I spent this time with some of the locals, I went and did the world's highest ultra marathon from Everest Base Camp, running down the mountain, covering 41 miles. The toughest part about this race is actually getting to the start line. You've got to trek up to over 5,000 meters above sea level. And then you turn around the next day and everyone says, off you go, run back down. 2 days before the start line, trekking up to Everest Base Camp, I contracted a parasite in my intestines, Giardia, from untreated water. Now, what this parasite does, it just clings to you and doesn't want to get out. And what your body says, I don't like it in here, I'm going to flush it out. Without going into too many details, my body tried to flush this parasite out any which way it could. It wouldn't let me put any more liquid or food into my body. And if I tried to and forced myself to eat or drink, it would flush it out and flush it out and flush it out, to a point that I look like one of those fitness models on the front cover of a magazine where you see all the rippling muscles and you can see the tissues of the muscle. Because the water in my muscles is being flushed out of my body to get rid of this parasite. I was weak. I lost a lot of weight in a 24-hour period, and I still hiked up to the start of this race. 10 hours later, on the start day, I quite literally walked, crawled, rolled, and hobbled to the start line of this ultra marathon. Brutal at the time, but a great story to tell once I got home. I then decided to take on my first ever triathlon. I know there's a few triathletes in the audience today. So I thought I would start at a level that made sense to me. Now, maybe some of you have heard of the Ironman triathlon, which for most people is seen as the pinnacle of the swim, bike, and run sport. The Ironman triathlon is a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, yes, 112 miles on a bike, and then you run a marathon. Sounds absolutely brutal, doesn't it? I signed up to a double marathon, where you quite literally double the distance. Not only that, this race was in North Wales, where the run leg of this event took me up and down Mount Snowdon to start before I completed a double marathon. The best part of this race was its name. I'm not making this up. You can Google this. The name of this double Ironman distance race was the Double Brutal Extreme Triathlon. Kid you not, that was the name. It took me 35 non-stop hours to complete this race. No sleep. Well, I think I had a short nap on the bike, but that was it. 35 non-stop hours. So I'm telling you just some of these crazy adventures that I've been on. And they are crazy and they are phenomenal, meeting all these people from around the world. And I've been off on many other adventures, climbing mountains in New Zealand, running ultra marathons all over the world, cycling across countries. Now, my goal of being an endurance adventurer sounds like it's picking up, sounds like it's taking off. And it was. I was speaking to audiences all over the globe. I'd had a documentary made about another big challenge that I did. And I was starting to write my first book. But during this period of time, where everyone on the outside went, wow, Luke is actually doing this. He is achieving this goal. I had a secret. I was battling with depression. I was battling with my mental health. It stemmed from retiring from football and going straight into these ultra endurance challenges, which are simply a sidetrack to distract me from not actually putting to bed, putting to rest, grieving the loss of football in my life, because that is all I ever wanted to do. And that is all I'd ever done in my life. I started to withdraw from the world when I wasn't doing these big challenges. Sometimes not even leaving my house or even my bed some days. Then I started to have insomnia, where some nights I would not even get into bed. Other nights it would get to 2 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't been to bed and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go for a run. And I would head out at 2 o'clock in the morning and run a marathon. Come back as the sun's coming up, have breakfast and start my day. Other days when I wouldn't go to bed, I would get on my bike and just cycle for hours and hours through the night because I couldn't sleep. And the only way I felt alive was doing these big, crazy challenges. And then they weren't fulfilling enough. And I started to binge eat in the middle of the night. I felt ashamed. I felt lost. I felt confused. This went on for a couple of years. My insomnia at its worst, I was sleeping 8 to 10 hours a week. Some nights not even getting into bed. Then I couldn't take it anymore. And on 2 occasions, I took myself off and stood on top of a bridge thinking, I don't want to do this anymore because the pain was so strong. Eventually, I reached out and got some help because I knew this is not how I wanted to live my life. On the outside, I'm doing these big, crazy challenges all around the world. On the inside, I was hurting. Now, there's a couple of things that really helped me during this time, and I think you all can benefit from this as well. One of the things that's helped me during my big ultra endurance challenges is being less negative. Now, we live in a world where you only need to turn on some sort of electrical device and you can see all the craziness, all the negativity of the world. And even in your own life, not everything is going to be perfect. Not everything is going to be positive. There are going to be certain situations and scenarios that happen to you, that are in front of you, that just aren't optimal for what you want to achieve, for what your company wants to achieve, or even your employees. So here's the thing. Many people will say it's about staying positive. But you know what? Sometimes that's just not an option. It's too hard. So here's the thing for you all to take away with today. Can we be less negative when we get hit with a setback or an obstacle, rather than just trying to fake it till we make it and be positive? Can we be less negative when we're trying to figure out a problem that's been put in front of us? And here's how we do this. When we be less negative, it's about asking yourself 3 questions. You don't have to jump up and down and get really motivated. It's about asking yourself 3 questions. What happened? Actually identify what happened that resulted in this less than optimal outcome. How did it happen? Was it your fault? Was it someone else's fault? Was it just something that you could not control? But understand the mechanics of how it happened. After you've recognized what happened, and then you know how it happened, then the next part of being less negative is, where do you need to now focus in order to help you to move forwards? Where's your focus going to be? On the fact that it happened? On the fact that you've lost clients? On the fact that you've lost money? On the fact you've lost employees? Or where is your focus going to be now on learning what happened? How did it happen? And then let's move past this. Now, I'm not standing here jumping up and down saying you've got to be 100% motivated to do this. Your emotions are got quite level. It's about being less negative, not overly positive when something really bad happens in your life. This can be from a professional perspective or even a personal one. So less negative is all about asking yourself those three questions. What happened? How did it happen? Where do I need to now focus in order to help me move forwards? So no matter what, where, how, or why you get hit with a negative situation, scenario, outcome, whether it's your family life, work, your own personal goals, or just life in general. You'll have obstacles, you'll have setbacks, and you'll need to adapt to them. Bottom line, life isn't fair and negative things happen to us. And if you can move past these less than optimal situations, scenarios, and outcomes, and be less negative, and choose the attitude you're going to take to accepting what's happened and then focusing on where you need to go next. This is why I truly believe the only limits we have are the ones that we place on ourselves. Thanks, everyone.